Hello and welcome to Full Spectrum Laser Training. My name is Brad Goodman. I'm the Laser Resource Manager here at MakeIt Labs. And if you're taking this class, you want to get authorized on the full spectrum. You should have already taken the Rabbit laser class, which covers a good majority of the stuff that you need to know to operate this laser, as these lasers are largely similar. Everything that you've already learned with respect to materials and cut handling and procedures is basically the same on this laser, so we're not going to be going through that extensively. The major difference is sort of the software and the workflow, so we're going to be covering that a lot. If you are taking this, you should have already taken and passed and authorized on the Rabbit. And what you're going to do here is you're going to watch this whole video. At the end of the video, you're going to want to take an online quiz. Now the bad news is you have to get 100% right on the quiz to get automatically authorized. The good news is I'm going to give you all the answers right here. So all you have to do is grab a pencil and a piece of paper, take good notes, and you should have no problem on it. We're going to start with a teeny tiny little safety review. It'll be quick. A couple rules on the laser. First is fires, as you know. Only authorized fire extinguishers for the laser room should be used in the laser room. That means either the halon fire extinguishers, the carbon dioxide fire extinguisher, and the other option is the fire blanket by the door. Don't take any fire extinguishers out of this room. Don't bring any other fire extinguishers into this room. The regular fire extinguishers that are on the ABC ones can cause damage to the laser and shouldn't be used on the laser. Neither should water be used on the laser. With any fire extinguishers in the lab, if you use any, please report use of that to the resource manager immediately. That's more so just so we can get them refilled. Same with any first aid kits you might use. If you use a first aid kit, notify safety board or the resource manager. Other major rule with laser is use of eye protection. The laser does have a cover that should make it okay for you, but we do ask for 2 barriers. So you should be wearing eye protection, and you are responsible for the safety of yourself and anyone in the surrounding area when operating any piece of equipment, so make sure anyone else in the room or around also has eye protection. You can wear the safety goggles here, or you can wear your own personal glasses. Any kind of barrier is okay as long as it's over your eyes. The other major rule of laser use, and this will be on the quiz, is you must be 2 words, present and attentive when operating any laser. So first word must be present, second word must be attentive. It has to be done in that order or you won't pass the quiz. But by present we mean you have to be in the room, you can't leave the room while the laser's running. And by attentive it means you don't have to be staring at the laser because bright lights are bad to stare at, but you should be paying attention, checking in sporadically and aware of what's going on. The only other safety item that's new to the full spectrum is that unlike the Rabbit where there's a shield that's blocking the tube, with the full spectrum the glass tube is exposed. So it sits in the back of the laser, you can see it here, there's no shield over it. It is glass, so it's delicate. If you're putting materials in and out of the bed, please be careful not to bump the laser. There's also some high voltage electrodes here which you should not touch, so stand clear of those. Now I'll also start by saying most of the information or all of the information that you'll need to run the laser and the software is available on the wiki. So you can pretty much pick up and learn anything there, any specifics, anything that I don't cover here from there. I highly encourage you to go and learn from there. Again, this class is not supposed to be totally comprehensive like the Rabbit one. It's supposed to be a little bit quicker, so we're going to give you the quick run through. In any details, I highly encourage you to check in there. Okay, let's get started. First off, turning the laser on and off. Unlike the Rabbit, we don't have a separate on-off switch. We just use the e-stop as both an e-stop and an on-off, although please be aware this might change in the future. But like the Rabbit's e-stop switch, you can push it to turn the laser off, and a little twist will turn the laser on. So normally if you're using this, the first thing you do after turning it on is to take your trusty key fob and swipe into the RFID system. And green means you're in. Again, the countdown will give you 10 minutes. I'm going to shut the laser off just so the fans aren't blowing. Again, the rat will give you a 10-minute timer. And if you don't start in the 10 minutes, it'll automatically log you out. If you want to restart that timer when it's about to expire, you can hit the blue button and it'll basically give you more time. If you're all done, you can either shut the unit off by pushing the e-stop button or hit the yellow button to log you out. Same as the Rabbit, no surprise there. So I've shut the laser off right now just so you can hear what I'm saying because it does get loud. But there are 3 things that you need to check whenever you use the full spectrum, and they're basically just like the rabbit. The first, and these are on the quiz, is the blower. The blower comes out of this tube right here, and it basically blows a little bit of cooling air right underneath the head. And when the laser is on, before you run the laser, you should make sure that you can put your hand under here and feel that the blower is actually running. The second, of course, is the exhaust fan, and you can put your hand up here and feel that it's vibrating and working, although it's pretty evident when I turn it on. Just from the noise alone that the fan is running. So number 2 is exhaust. The third one here is the cooler. This one is basically a little fish tank pump, and it's pretty quiet, so it's hard to hear on its own over the exhaust. But if you do put your hand here, you can feel it vibrating a little bit. So those are the 3 things you need to check before running: the blower, the exhaust, and the cooler. So the full spectrum is the same kind of carbon dioxide laser that the rabbit uses. It's only about half the power. So you're going to basically be using the same materials, which means you're probably principally going to be using wood and acrylic most of the time. So we're not going to go back through a whole comprehensive talk on materials, but anything that you learned on the rabbit should apply. You will need more power though in cutting because the full spectrum is only 40 watts where the rabbit is 80 watts. But typically you're probably going to be doing more engraving on the full spectrum than cutting anyways. So the first major difference between the rabbit and the full spectrum is that when you go to put a new piece of material in the rabbit, we hit this Z0 button to do the automatic height calibration of the head. The full spectrum doesn't have an automatic calibration, so we have to do this manually, but it's really not that hard. What you basically do is you take your piece of wood, you put it under the laser, and then we have these little spacers right here. We keep them here, and they're basically just pieces with known dimensions. These arrows right here represent the height that the laser is supposed to be off the material. So all we do is we take the material, we put it underneath the head like that. Notice that when you look at the head from here, from this angle, you really can't see it, but there is a little cylindrical protuberance underneath it, and this piece has to be under that cylinder because that's where the laser the laser optics actually are. So what you want to do is you want to take this set screw right here, loosen it, and then when you do loosen it, this whole head's going to go up and down just like that. So take this piece. I'm trying to do this with one hand right now, so it's a little hard. Set it right under there, and then once you get it under there, that is the correct height. Take the set screw, tighten the set screw, but tighten it somewhat snug but somewhat gently. It's only aluminum, so it can actually get messed up. So don't over tighten it. There are some lock washers that should be okay. Once you do that, you can remove the piece and your height is set up properly for this piece. Obviously, like the rabbit, if you change a piece to a different one of a different height or a different thickness, you're going to have to redo this. So another major difference between the full spectrum and the rabbit is when we use the rabbit, we sort of use a model where we take our design, we send it to the rabbit, and then from there it lives on the rabbit, and everything we do is on the rabbit. We can use the control panel to test it, to hit go, to move the head around and all that, but the computer's out of the picture. It's sort of, we download it over and the laser's totally in charge at that point in time. With the full spectrum, it's a little bit different. The computer is more actively controlled with the cutting process and talking to the laser in real time. So for this reason, it's important to know that the sequence has to be, because basically the computer's going to open a connection to the laser. So when you're using it, you want to turn the laser on first, and then you're going to want to open the software. So the software is this program called Retina Engrave, and it's a little blue triangle. Again, you double click on that, and it opens. So make sure the laser is on before you open the software. And if you have to shut the laser off for any reason, you'll probably have to close the software before turning the laser back on and then relaunch the software. If not, you'll find that you'll go to do something and the software will give you errors and say that there are connection problems. And again, if that happens, close the software, turn the laser on or restart the laser, and then relaunch the software. So for the sake of this video, I've disabled the fans and blowers so things are going to be a little bit more quieter so you can hear what I'm talking about. So I've powered the laser on and I've signed into RAT over here. So I have basically 10 minutes to do something or RAT is going to automatically sign me out. Very similar to the Rabbit, one of the first things that you should do after you're powered on and signed up is to home the laser. And somewhat similar to the Rabbit, we have a home button right here. It's this little button with the house on it, and when I press it, it's basically going to do its XY0. And obviously, if you don't do this and you go to do a cut, the full spectrum software will complain that you need to rehome. So if it does complain, again, hit the home button and it will do that. Like the Rabbit, we have some jog buttons that we can use on the front control panel that'll move the laser head. I can jog to the left, I can jog down. And again, similar to the Rabbit, I'm usually going to put my workpiece wherever is okay on the bed, and I'm going to move the laser into the position on the workpiece where I want to start my cut or engrave. Also, please note on this video, right now you will not see the red marking laser that you normally see on the Rabbit to tell you exactly where the laser is pointed. We're working on that right now, so it may or may not be fixed by the time that you actually go to use the laser. So you'll have to kind of infer where the position of your cut's going to be underneath the head, but that's where it is. So like I mentioned, we launch the software after we have powered the laser on, and in doing so it comes up. This is the software. It has some upsides and some downsides to it, which we'll cover. One of the first things we'll notice right here is we have this panel up here where we can jog the laser up, down, left, and right. We can even slow down the jog, and these operations are similar to the buttons that we just discussed on the keypad. So you can jog it via the keypad or via the software. So the way this software is kind of arranged, it's very different than the Rabbit, and this is where the majority of the differences you'll find are. For one, there are two tabs that it uses up here, which are raster engrave and vector cut. And these two tabs have the distinct purposes of dealing with any engraving you're going to do, rastering, which is again going back and forth to do like an image, and vector cutting, which is following a path, usually with a higher power, slower laser, to cut through a piece of material. So unlike the Rabbit, where we defined different layers, and we could say this layer is for cutting or this layer is for engraving, this uses two different tabs. One is for all the raster stuff, and the other is for the vector stuff. Now, over here on the right side, we have the control panel, and the control panel is a little bit wacky because, as we discussed, we have the buttons up here to move the laser, but the control panel is a set of stuff that both deals with raster and vector, which is a little confusing because you can be in raster or vector mode up here, but you see both raster and vector stuff over here all the time. Like it's not like you'd think that the control panel would be mode sensitive to only show you raster stuff when you're in raster mode and only vector when you're in vector mode, but it doesn't work like that. So basically, this top section over here deals with raster stuff. And unlike the Rabbit, where we have such a high-powered laser, we have a book and we can look up cut settings and we can set power depending on the material and stuff, this software is a little bit simpler. By default, raster power is at 100%, raster speed is at 100%. That means anytime we do a raster engrave, it's going to run at 100% power and speed, and we typically leave it like this because it's only a 40-watt laser, and we don't have so much excess power to spare that we want to typically dial that back during engrave. But you can, and if you need to, it's there. We're going to be talking about black and white threshold later. But on the vector side of thing, down here in this lower section is where they talk about vector stuff. And we can set up speed, power in order for our vector layers down here. Then we'll get into these more specifically when we look at raster and vector cutting themselves. Now let's do an engrave workflow. So the bad news is that you have to use BMP files for bitmaps that you want to engrave. The good news is you don't have to do much massaging outside of the program. So in downloads here, I have a face, and we're going to play with this face. So again, it's importing here as an engrave tab. Now, there are basically 3 different modes that you can use to engrave something and the way it deals with the image. One is no dither, which is sort of a black and white representation of the face. The other is a dither, where it's going to basically try to mathematically get it as gray as possible. And the other is a halftone dither, where it's going to give it this weird kind of mezzo-tinted effect to it, which is good in a lot of engraves. And all this really depends on kind of what you want. There's also 3 different DPIs, and the DPI is going to basically give you a finer resolution, and the resolution is easier to see here in the halftone, where you can see that versus this, and it also gets a little bit darker. So depending on kind of the look you're going for, if you wanted really high DPI, you might, since it slows the laser down when it's doing higher DPI, you might want to decrease your power. And again, raster power settings are over here. So speed we typically leave up all the way, but you can decrease your raster power if things are looking a little bit dark. So anyways, again, that's no dither, simple, and halftone at 3 different DPIs. So there's really kind of 9 combinations of the way you can engrave something, and those are really the only options. It's right out of the box like that. It's not like the Rabbit where there's a million speeds and feeds, and you have to do a lot in something like GIMP. This will really do it for you. So I pulled in that bitmap file, and right now, as you can see on this display here on the left, I'm in no dither mode. So it basically takes that grayscale file or color file and basically picks a black level and a white level, and anything that's higher or lower than that, it turns black or white. So I can adjust that threshold with this black and white threshold slider. So that's in the control panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, and as I do that, I'm going to decrease that slider, and I'm going to increase that slider. And you can see that basically picks the gray level at which it's going to engrave or not engrave. And I can kind of just tune that slider to, to however I want that to look. If that's what I want to get, then I can get that, fine. And again, that's this no dither look, and it's no dither over here in the right panel. Now, if I want to get a real kind of true gray representation, I can go to simple dither, and simple dither gives me, again, you can almost not even see it because the camera is can't even zoom in that far, but it gives me a very kind of photorealistic picture of what that gray looks like. And the third option is halftone dither. And halftone dither gives me that kind of that mezzo-tinted look. And actually, I can blow this up right now. So if I blow that up, you can see it's that kind of mezzo-tinted bitmap kind of look. Whereas simple dither gives me that kind of real photorealistic-ish gray level, and the halftone gives me that black and white. Now, there's also, like we looked on here, there's also 3 different DPIs we can use. So up here is where we can change the DPI. Now there's a wacky little kind of bug in the software where you have to be in no dither mode in order to change DPI. So I'm going to go to 250 DPI just because it's the blockiest, and it'll show us the features a little better. So I go 250 DPI halftone dither. You can see that's that sort of mezzo-tinting kind of effect. Say I want to look at a really high resolution, again, I have to go to no dither in order to change the resolution to 1000 DPI. And then when I do, I can go back into halftone dither. It says it's going to take a while. It doesn't really take that long, but it'll take a few seconds. And when it does, so that's that halftone dithering at 1000 DPI. So again, if I were to engrave that as is, it would look kind of dark as they do here. So I might want to drop the speed down a little bit. But that is basically all you need to do to prep a raster file. Obviously, for scanning, this is about, as you can see here, it's about almost 2 inches by 2 inches. And there are some tools over here that are a little bit wonky, but I think this one is for resize, so I could size that down a little bit, 75%. Oh, and it actually went back into no dither. But you can see now that's like 1.5 inches. So basically you do that, and that's kind of the workflow you need to prep a photo for engraving, and you get some really nice results. Now, like the raster, say I have my tool over here, sorry, like the rabbit, say I have my tool over here, in my piece in here, and I want to get that ready, I can go over and I can use these jog buttons over here. I can jog to the right and jog down a little bit. Or I can move my piece under the laser. Now, this thing has what they call a perimeter button, and the perimeter button is sort of like the test button over here. And it's kind of neat, you can see if you hover over it. So that home button that was on the control panel, we have home button here. The perimeter button, which is like the test button, is over here. And you can see when you hover over any of these, you actually get hotkeys. So I could just hit H right now to home it, or I could hit J right now to jog the perimeter. So I'm going to do that. That's sort of like the test button. So I'm going to hit, I could click that button, or I'm going to hit J on the keyboard. And this is going to, again, show me the bounding box. Oh, and it's mad because I did not home the laser. And this is the error you get when you do not home a laser. So I can do that by hitting that home button on the thing, or I could hit home button there. So after I home, I'm going to move my laser back to where I want it to go. And now I'm going to hit the J key to jog that perimeter, again like the test. And so it's showing me the bounding box, which is hard to see because the marking laser isn't on and the camera angle is funny. But it draws the bounding box and it pauses at each corner in the bounding box. Optionally, there is another button which is called perimeter steps, and it's the P button. And what that does is it's like the test, except it just goes one corner at a time. So I hit P, it jumps to the upper right corner. I hit P again, jumps to the lower right corner. Hit P again, lower left, and P again, it goes to the upper right. So the other weird little thing here is, you know, with Rabbit, you can define your laser origin to be upper right or top left or center or whatever. The easiest way to think about the full spectrum is think about it as it's always going to cut from the upper left. And I don't want to get too far into it, but if I use this P button over here, and I hit over here, and that now you're in the bottom right. And if I were to say, okay, do my job now, it's going to actually go to the upper left and then start from there. So it's a little wonky. So think of it that way. But so you have jog and perimeter as a way of telling you where you are in your workpiece. So there is a third tab over in the software called Design View. And Design View is a little wonky. I don't like using it, and it's a way to quickly draw something inside the software, and it's really bad, so I basically don't use it. But I'll just show you really quickly. Say, for instance, I select the circle tool. I'm going to draw a little circle here. And there are some things, and I hate it because, for example, you can see here the units are inches. You can hear it wants me to specify a radius. The radius is clearly not in inches. Is it millimeters? Is it mils? I don't know. You can do, you know, thickness. You can do some stuff. I'm not going to kill this whole thing, but the idea of it behind it is when you're done with your little design, you hit this render button. And what render does, you can tell if you wait 1 second, is it now renders it sort of like it does when you import something. And wait for it. It pulls it into your tabs up here. So your raster engrave tab, you have that circle, and more importantly, your vector, you now have that circle. So if I come now over here to my workpiece, I can hit J for jog. Yeah, sure, that's roughly the piece I want to use. And now say I really want to cut this thing. So we discussed over here, this middle portion of the control panel is for raster properties. This only pertains to raster. I am vector cutting right now. So we can color our layers. In this case, I only have one layer, and again, I'm not going to get too far into this. You can look up the software manual, but you could reset the color if you want of that layer, and you can see here the layer's different color. Like Rabbit, different colors are going to correlate to different cut settings. We only see one layer because we only in one color because we only have one on here. We can't drag and drop and change the order, but you can use this order number to number the orders. It'll go from lowest to highest. And basically you're setting speed and power. If you want to disable output, you can set passes to 0 and it won't do any passes. Is how many times it's going to do. So typically this is going to be 1. Again, typically your power is always going to be at 100. Now, if you are cutting, this guy cuts really slow, so you're going to have to drop your speed way down. I'm going to try setting the speed down to 10 to cut through this approximately 5 millimeter piece of plywood. And in 1 second, we're going to cut. I want to do as much talking as I can before I actually turn the fans on, where it's going to be really loud. But basically, to cut or to engrave, first you're going to go up here, and this is going to tell you what you want to do. Do you want to do a raster engrave? Do you want to do a vector cut? Do you want to do one then the other if you have designs in 2 tabs that you want to do an engrave and cut? Or you also have simulation options. So in this case, if I say simulate 4x and I hit go, you're going to see the little red dot trace what the laser is actually going to do, which is interesting, I guess. So basically, to do the actual job, we are going to go to vector mode, and then we're going to hit the green arrow. And when we do, on the software, we're going to see that red dot move around in real time, just like we did under the simulation. But that's going to be doing that in real time as the wood cuts here. So I'm going to start that in 1 second. The fans are going to be loud, so I probably won't be able to talk much over it. So the laser's on. We're logged into RAT. We have homed it. We've set our starting position. We've tested it with the perimeter thing. We have our laser goggles on. So now we're going to cut this vector job. Again, we're in vector mode, so I'm going to hit start. And when I do pretty much anything, there's always a little pause first with the software. And now we see that moving. And we see the laser actually cutting. So let's start a job. The first and the easiest way to get something into Retina Engrave is to open a bitmap. So you can just use File Open, select a file. You always got to wait a second whenever you do kind of any open operation, and then you get something. In this case, it's right in the Engrave tab. So that's one way to do it, is to open a bitmap. So it will not work with JPEGs or PNGs. If you have any of those, you're going to have to convert them over to bitmaps. So the second way to get something in, and I'm going to do something really wonky. Here we have LibreOffice. And just to kind of show you the capabilities of this, let's say I am going to insert a shape and I'm going to pick a star. And let's say I got a 5-point star. And now I can, why didn't that insert? Insert shape, star, 5-point. There we go. I'm going to drag my 5-pointed star. And just for fun, I'm going to give it a wonky color. I'm going to give it a kind of a very loud, weird kind of sunburst gradient. There we go. So I'm going to send this to the laser and see what's going to happen. Now, there's 2 ways that you can do it. Say, for instance, you're working at home and you're working maybe in some exotic program that we don't have here at the lab. In order to export this for a format that we can bring into the lab and we can load into Retina Engrave, we're going to need to export it. Now, and this is one of the items on the quiz, the format that Retina Engrave can pull in is called an XPS. XPS, and that's all in lowercase. So in order to go from any program on a Microsoft platform into XPS, there is a method, and this is cool because it'll work in any program on your system, regardless if it actually has XPS capabilities. So you go to File, Print, and you can select a printer. You can select, and your computer at home will probably have the Microsoft XPS document writer. And if you select that as your printer, like you are printing to this, it will give you a dialog for you to give it a file name. And we're going to call this star. And most importantly, by default, it wants to save as type OpenXPS. We don't want OpenXPS. We want XPS, like in the quiz. So we're going to save this, or we're going to kind of print this to the XPS driver, and it's going to save it to an XPS file. Now, needless to say, if we come over to here and we go open file or project, and I look at the documents, we will have our star XPS file, and I can open that, and when I do, and again, wait for it. So in our raster tab, we now have a star, and it looks this weird little spot on it. Why? Because, well, we had that weird little color gradient on here. And on the vector tab, we have, well, this is kind of weird. Again, it's that color gradient, and that came in as black. And then we have the outline of it, which came in as blue. And if you look really closely here, it was actually a blue outline in the star. And this actually allows us to do things like go into, like say we wanted to vector cut, we can go in here and we can say, well, that black layer, I don't want to vector cut the black layer, so I can set passes to 0. And it would allow me to just cut the blue layer and to set speed and power independently for that blue layer. Furthermore, if I wanted to raster engrave it, I could come over here and I could apply simple dither, halftone dither, no dither. I can set the black and white. Whoops, I'm not in there yet. I could get no dither and set the black and white threshold for it. So the neat thing about this is, let's say I wanted to do this, I could set halftone dither. That looks kind of cool. And so I have halftone dither set, and I have the vector set, and I could even go raster then vector to cut and do both of those in one pass. So that was the second method. That's going to file print XPS to generate an XPS file. There's an even easier way. If I'm in the lab and I'm on the same computer that full spectrum software, Retina's Engrave is running on, I can just go File, Print, and I can say Full Spectrum Engineering Driver. And when I hit OK, and this is important, the Retina Engrave software is running on the computer, it's going to literally take the file from one program and print it right into Retina Engrave. So I don't even actually need to save it and then to reopen it over here. I can just file print from one program on this PC directly into Retina Engrave. So another important thing to know is that if you go onto the MakeIt Labs wiki under the full spectrum area, you'll see a link on there so that you can download and install Retina Engrave on your own computer at home. You don't need any kind of license key or anything for it. It'll be fully functional. You can save stuff, and then you can use those save files to bring right in here and cut them as soon as you get into the lab. So to do that, you basically go to File, Save Project, and when you do, you're going to save it as an RE1 file. So RE1 stands for Retina Engrave version 1, and it's that RE1 file that you're going to save and you're going to bring into the lab. And then obviously when you do, again, it's File, Open, and when you open that RE1 file, you're going to get your whole design back, including any settings, layer colors, anything wacky that you've applied. So that's it. Those are basically everything you need to know. Like I said, this wasn't meant to be a really comprehensive class because the Rabbit covered laser cutting in general in much more detail. But if you do want more information, you can go to, and this is the last question on the quiz, the wiki, W-I-K-I. And on there are two important things. One is the manual for retina engrave, and the other is the manual for the laser itself. And those two can discuss in detail some of the more advanced features and some of the other stuff that we sort of skimmed over a little bit in this class. So again, please check that out. Please go back into the training link, take the quiz, take your notes that you should have taken from this, answer the questions, and it will automatically authorize you to use the laser. Good luck.